Strategy Sessions by Thirsty Bandit Consulting. Episode 2, Brand Identity.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Strategy Sessions. My name is Corey Kraychek. I'm here with Rachel Brown from Thirsty Bandit. And today we have a blast from the past for me, an amazing designer based out of Philadelphia, Steve Klein, who has worked with me on several projects over the years. And Steve actually is the principal and owner of Dakota Diesel. So Dakota like the states and diesel like the fuel. You can find him on Instagram or LinkedIn under that name, or just dakotadiesel.com. Steve, thanks for joining us this morning. And,
You're welcome.
why don't you give us a few words about what you've been working on and what you do at Dakota Diesel before we get into some questions?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for launching this podcast series. I think it's a great idea. I'm excited for what the Thirsty Bandit brings forth, and all the things that you guys are going to be doing. As far as Dakota Diesel's I've been a graphic design studio for over 20 years, where I do everything for large businesses, local businesses. I worked in pretty much every industry. And I think it's been great for me to just see how some industries, how industries follow different trends, and how I'm able to kind of pull from one industry to another for clients of kind of all sizes, local companies to larger companies, and even some agencies that I work with. So it's been kind of fun to see how I can kind of connect those different ideas and different ways companies do things, brand strategy, launching products. So I think that experience level has really helped me bring that to clients. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we were talking earlier, we wanted to hone in on one specific thing with you today, which we all, I think, collectively feel is sort of a foundational piece when we're talking about brand strategy, right? And that's identity, right? And coming up with a right identity or an identity renewal for an existing business is really one of those foundational pillars for strategic planning, for program development, for sales and growth activities. So if you could maybe walk us through your process, and if you enjoy new brand identity or brand identity refresh, either with like a start from scratch concept or an established business, which one do you typically like?
I mean, I think starting from scratch is always fun. You get to see how something can kind of come together, from the name, color palette, fonts, all those sort of tools of the trade. Bringing all of that to life and especially working with somebody that maybe doesn't have a familiarity with how all those things kind of go together. Working with them to bring that out of them, to give that stuff meaning, and how how a font, how a color palette, how a tone really drives a brand. So from scratch for sure. But from scratch can be from existing brands too, where they'll launch a new service or a product, and they needed to differentiate themselves in the marketplace, with a service that maybe already exists from a competitor. So I think from scratch is always sort of the fun start. I say fun because I'm doing this for a long time. I still having fun creating, drawing, and building these brands.
So then I guess as you're either building from scratch, like what are some of the things that a winery should not be focusing on as they go into kind of like this brand renewal?
I think for wineries and really, I want to say any business, but that's a blanket statement. I think trying to be perfect out of the gate is one thing that I'd like to sort of concentrate on. And we're not going to get it right, right away. We're going to need to test and learn. We're going to need to put things out there, and getting out there is almost more important than it being perfect. So I would encourage, social media gives us a good way to create some some kind of fleeting messages, right? Like those social media things are just there for a little bit and they're gone. I think it's good for brands to sort of test and learn and find out what kind of resonates with their clients, with their with different products that they're launching. And I think as long as you're putting stuff out there and not trying to be perfect out of the gate, trying different things, whether it be illustration or different educational things, I think that there's a reluctance to do something and be wrong. And I don't know that you can. I mean, I'm sure you can be wrong by doing something wrong, but I think that the key here is to get out there and just watch and see what's kind of resonating.
I love that. It's don't be paralyzed by the decision to change the brand, beta test some things, use social media as that easy platform. I mean, Meta makes it very easy for you to A/B test certain ideas and see what your consumer engagement is going to be, and then use that as foundational elements for identity build out.
Yeah,
And you're right. I mean, we see it so much with our clients that they get stuck and they're incapable of making a decision right away because they feel like it's this monumental thing.
right.
But the reality is you need to get started, you need data, and all of that will inform you on what sort of the final brand vision will be down the road.
For sure. Yeah.
So creative process. I mean, let's talk about that for a minute. So you've got an established winery brand. They're considering identity renewal. You're thinking, all right, we want to test out some things in the market. I mean, what do you do to establish that creative process with them?
So, everything I do starts with an interview, a brand doc, a questionnaire that I'll custom create for that industry. So I'll do some preliminary research on sort of what's out there, and even my initial phone call with companies that are looking to work with me. Who are your competitors? Who do you see is doing it sort of the right way? And maybe that's not even in industry. Maybe that's another industry. Maybe they love the way their local coffee shop kind of has their brand packaged and the way their signage is. Inspiration and all these things come from a lot of different places. So I like to find out right as soon as I can what the client's vibe is. And then incorporate that into the questionnaire. And then I always start with sketches. I always start with pencil and paper, kind of old school, but I feel like you can get a lot of different ideas down, and nothing feels final when it's just in pencil. We can create a lot of different sort of rough, if it's like a logo concept, rough concepts, and then the client sort of reviews those, and maybe we'll take aspects of number 3 versus number 5, and that becomes maybe a new concept that we maybe weren't thinking. So I think that I'll work sketches, then I'll move to like a digital sort of proof of that sketch. We know it's going to have to be scalable eventually. It's going to have to work in a small social media profile icon. So the logo needs to really be versatile, and that starts with the concepts, and then I'm talking about logo specifically, but I think once you sort of nail down the essence and the tone of that logo, I think then you're honing it with like font treatments and color palette. That's sort of the evolution. And in a perfect world, the client is very much a part of that. I'm explaining, why one sketch of a concept, what that's sort of saying versus, how a color palette changes the tone of that concept, and then, how fonts impact that. And then lastly, when I'm finished with like, okay, we have an approved logo and a color palette, there's a brand guideline that I always say is like, this is V1 of the brand guideline. This thing wants to evolve. This is a living, breathing document that needs to grow with you, and really needs to be versatile out of the gates, but also needs to create some kind of brand standard, so that we have things that we can kind of draw a little bit of a line in the sand and pivot away from that. So yeah, so I think my process is extremely collaborative with my clients. Sometimes they like it a lot. Sometimes they're like, you know what, Steve, what's
Just
your
do it.
recommendation? Let's go. Yes. Yeah.
Do you have any like tips or tricks for an established brand to kind of stay within their identity guidelines?
So tips and tricks. I think the, you know, with that, the brand guidelines, act as those guardrails. I think that as we're evolving, um, there's different tones for the brand, and when the brand is maybe speaking in like a TikTok setting versus like signage and at maybe like a wine tasting event. um Sometimes that the brand needs to become off as more maybe authoritative and a little quieter and let the product sort of be front and center, versus we need to attract a new audience, and we want to try this like a TikTok sort of behind the scenes movie, or some kind of more whimsical, more sort of fun kind of aspect of the brand. And I think that the guidelines need to sort of portray that. And I think that, as I mentioned earlier, those guidelines are going to kind of evolve. If, say that TikTok movie did really well, and that side of the brand maybe is resonating with a new audience that we want to sort of go after, and have more of that audience come into the winery or buy the product. I think that needs to kind of be added to the brand standard. So here's how when we're talking to this audience, these are the learnings, this is what we want to sort of do more of, and how can we kind of reinvent this idea and apply it to some new audiences.
I love that, and I think that kind of brings us back to one of the original points on our call today, which was when you're coming up with a brand identity or a renewal, you need to think about the versatility of that identity, right? In
For
order
sure.
to be able to be omni-channel in marketing strategy, in order to apply it to different things. How will this look on a bottle? How will this look on a tasting menu? How will this look in various digital formats? How will this look in video? And I mean, more so today than ever before, there are so many different channels to communicate your brand and communicate that identity, that I think that versatility is imperative
Sure.
to any design moving forward. So this has been fantastic, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us today. This could go so much longer than what it did, and I think as we get the podcast established, maybe we can get you come back and dig in on another topic at some other point. But in the meantime, thanks so much. Best of luck with Dakota Diesel. Please check him out online, and hopefully you'll get a bunch of new winery business from this podcast in the near future.
That'd be great. I'll know who my winery consultant is going to be if that business does come my way.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks again. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Strategy Sessions. Please join us next time.